what an honor to be here. I've been involved with Culturati since pretty much the very beginning. I remember when Eugene first told me about his big idea, and I was thinking a lot back to that moment. Where is Eugene? Right over there. So Eugene, if you remember at that moment, you were talking about, I think that the winds are going to shift here when it comes to company culture, and that there's going to be a lot more interest in gathering to discuss best practices. And you were, of course, spot on with that, and it's amazing to see what this has become. And I'm going to just give a quick intro of myself and then to Sol, but I'm on this mission now with Love Conquers Fear, which is both a podcast, it's a book coming out. The book comes out on June 23rd in honor of the solstice. It's called Love Conquers Fear with the subtitle Humanity, AI, and the Age of Abundance for All. Mm-hmm. And the reason I'm doing what I'm doing right now is that I think that humanity overall is in need of a culture shift, which is found in the ancient spiritual traditions, all at the common root, that love has to conquer fear for humanity to go through the gate to make it to the age of abundance for all. And I was honored to have Sol on the podcast. We recorded yesterday, and this is part 2 of the Love Conquers Fear episode that'll come out. It's episode 54. And it's a really neat synchronicity, Eugene, to think about that you were seeing that, and you were kind enough to bring me into the tent on what you were seeing as a thought partner. And now you're bringing me here on stage to talk about this shift that I see that overall humanity needs to have. And we've heard about that here on the stage in lots of different ways, from both the utopian and the dystopian, and the kind of in the middle case. So here we are. Sol is a very good friend of mine. I'm super honored to have her here. This is her first Culturati. And let me just tell them something I learned about you on the podcast, just to set this up. So this conference started out with bravery and courage as a thematic. And Sol is the person who grew up here as an immigrant with immigrant parents, and always was really determined to lead with courage and prove herself, including jumping into the pool and going into the swim team when she did not know how to swim, then going into rugby when she did not know how to play rugby, and somehow always ending up on top. And you became the world's first chief AI officer in 2016, which is not surprising when people get to hear your background really unpacked in that episode that we did together yesterday.
I mean, for context, I have to let you know, as immigrant parents, they're not woke or overly protective. So when I told my mom, I was like, well, I don't know how to swim. Why do you want me to join the swim team? She's like, it's easy. Just don't sink. That was her advice to me. And I was like, okay, thanks. So I show up in my Kmart bathing suit that's 3 sizes too big, because immigrant parents don't buy you what you fit into. They buy what you can grow into. And it was just a hot mess. Scrunchy, hair everywhere. Just to give you guys a visual, it was not pretty.
Why don't we talk about how you became the world's first chief AI officer? Because that in and of itself is like an improbable type of occurrence, and
it is.
Only in Sol's life would this have happened.
I mean, for all of your roles, show of hands, how many of you guys thought growing up this is what you wanted to do and this is who you were going to be? And I don't know if we believe in synchronicity and it was meant to happen. I don't know if we believe in divine paths and divine timing, or it's just sheer chaos and you started making some random decisions and you ended up where you were. But I'm going to say it's all 3 for me. Went from professional rugby player. It was time to actually get a real job. I took the first job offer, which was data analyst, data engineer. Didn't know how to spell either word, but figured it out. Ended up getting into the space when no one else wanted to be in the space. And then I became a partner at IBM, and I saw their data practice. Then Watson beat Ken Jennings. Did anyone see that 2011 Jeopardy televised? Yeah, it was pretty remarkable. And that's when IBM said, okay, we're taking Watson to market. And so I was like, let me in, coach. You can't do AI without data. I didn't know if that was true, but they bought it. And that's what I did for 5 years, was we helped launch Watson. And for 5 years, from 2011 to 2016, it was fly around the world, AI strategies, AI use cases, development and deployments. Went to EY, started their advisory practice because they didn't want to just be an audit company. My client hired me and said, essentially, stop selling the dog food. Why don't you eat your own dog food? So I went from management consulting to industry, and that's when I became chief AI officer in 2016. And then since then, it was a series of like C-suite positions. I've held it 5 times over and some across Fortune 50s. But the real thing happened was when I joined AWS. I had joined as their like head of technology for North America for their startups division. And we define startups as any company with 3 billion ARR or less, right? Just to show you the scale. Yeah, pretty crazy. Anthropic and Perplexity were my customers, and I saw the engineers and the solution architects. And we were having a senior leadership offsite. And so we were all in Seattle. And I couldn't believe this, but you're sitting there and you're listening to these amazing unicorn startup CEOs talk about how they started and their mission and purpose. And no less than 4 of the CEOs shared that their mission and purpose is to replace the human workforce with the digital workforce. Flat out. And well, from AWS's perspective, we're just happy that they're successful because guess where all their workloads run? On Bedrock and AWS. It wasn't a humane discussion or community discussion or humanity discussion, but it was unbelievable that we were hearing this. I was like, wait a minute, that's not why we launched Watson. Our entire purpose was to amplify every individual and create force multipliers because the expectations of growth aren't linear, they're exponential. What is this narrative around displacement and replacement? Like, this just doesn't make any sense. And this was very early in the narrative. And then what happened to be something that was irking me turned into a whisper, then a narrative. And at the same time, I was like, what's my purpose? What's my purpose? And it all came together. And so I resigned from AWS because I had finally figured out that my purpose and calling was fundamentally around security, securing the future workforce and making sure that my kids have a place to grow and have an identity and purpose, and then securing AI ecosystems. So I do the keynotes, I do the writing, I do the research with Harvard. I'm a senior fellow there. Where's Eileen? Hi, Eileen. But I'm also the chief strategy officer for an AI security, cybersecurity company, because for the first time ever, in the many years I've been doing technology engagements, we are being told to run with scissors. And it's the only way I can describe it. Not even with a cap on. Just go. Just go. And I've never been given that full permission. And I've seen when things go wrong, and we're so good at sweeping it under the rug that I just feel that more of the balanced narratives need to be shared. So it took me here, and this is where we are now.
Yeah, well, it's an honor to have you here. And on this incredibly beautiful campus that HEB, Charles Budd, gifted for public school education. It's really amazing.
It's wonderful.
So, you know, I've got a long time background as an entrepreneur, and I tend to think of things from that lens. I've started, 6 companies, been fortunate enough to found one that had a very successful IPO. And I see my big dream in terms of what this technology moment allows us to do is create millions and millions of personalized products and services that we can't imagine today. And yes, there's going to be disruption and there's going to be companies that do layoffs, et cetera, but the necessity is the mother of invention, and it's going to lead to a boom in the startup ecosystem. So I look at it from that lens in terms of my optimistic, case. How do you look at it from a bigger company case? Because you're out there meeting with tons of big companies all the time. You've also worked at many big companies, which are a bit foreign for me. That was like the beginning of my career before I became an entrepreneur. And so I'm curious, like, how do you see this future workforce developing and companies finding their way in this moment?
So I think there's a few layers to the cake. I think there's some ironies, there's some paradoxes, and there's some theories that are breaking everything. For bigger companies, we are trying to, efficiency and productivity are primary metrics for us when it comes to artificial intelligence. And what I'm trying to retrain everyone is I'm like, so what if we do more of the wrong things? You're technically more productive. But is there a way to rethink it? Should we be measuring effectiveness? How are you growing your business and growing your workforce in parallel? There is another way of defining success, in addition to efficiency, productivity, which is important. But for some reason, the effectiveness measure or metric has not made it to the scoreboard of whether or not we are being successful. But I'm showing them across their functions of, okay, you've now increased productivity 22%, but you're creating more output of the incorrect decisions. That's not a good measure, but if your scoreboard looks green, you must be hitting the mark. So I think there's a new measurement. I think we're also not measuring cultural ROI and relevancy ROI. We're only purely obsessed with financial ROI. But cultural ROI is we're setting the temperature in the room right now of what's to come, even if we have more unknowns than knowns. But we have to. It's part of staying relevant. And then the relevancy ROI is if we don't do this now, where does that put us in 2 to 3 years? Because with this path, there is a theory, and we're trying to assess whether it'll come true, is the market share is not going to be owned by big enterprises. There's too much competition. The speed to develop, the acceleration is getting faster and faster. It's Moore's law in pure effect. We're going to potentially pivot into an economy of microservices and microeconomies, especially if we're not hiring the younger talent. They've got to work. They need a purpose. They're going to come up with an idea. They're going to vibe code their way through it. Some VC's going to invest in it, and they've got a $15 million buyout. Meanwhile, us mere mortals are still working at enterprise, 14 alignment meetings in, and we still haven't made a freaking decision. That is a plausible option. So I think that's a reality. But in terms of the workforce, I know we don't have answers yet. But there are a few things that have been, if you're extracting signal from noise, that are pretty evident. The first one is, and I think this is where some interesting paradoxes kick in, the only governance that we can all holistically agree on as we're deploying artificial intelligence is human experts in the loop, correct? Like we all say that, human in the loop, human in the loop. Well, guess what? If we are removing the pathway, if we are not hiring the early career or college graduates, we are not giving them the channel to gain the expertise. With all due respect, who the heck is governing these things in 8 to 12 years? So the very thing that we're relying on is also the pathway that we're destroying at this moment in time. So we've got to encourage folks that, by the way, we cannot disintegrate this channel to developing expertise. And also, if the name of the game is really around business process optimization and redesigning a workflow, well, if you had a person in procurement or supply chain or an FP&A who've been doing their job for 16 years, they may or may not have the capacity of redesigning that workflow. But if you get some new energy in there that's been there 6 to 9 months, guess what the young folks love telling us what to do, how we can do it better. So there is a symbiotic energy that can be developed. And I think the third, which we're statistically trying to prove, because we don't know the magnitude, is by getting rid of early career and college grads, it's actually going to cost companies more money in the future because of law of supply and demand. If there isn't enough supply, then by default, those that are considered the experts can charge a higher premium. It's a super simple equation. So right now, let's say you've got your execs, your senior leaders, your middle tier, early career, and your college entries. If we cut off that pipeline or we reduce it so much and it compresses, well, middle management, who's now senior, instead of there being 400 of them, there's only 75. Maybe 100, and instead of paying them $200,000 a year, they're going to want $650 because guess what? They are in demand. And if you're not in a sexy industry, if you're not in a glamorous industry, they may not want to even work for you. So it's actually going to cost the company a lot more money, but unfortunately, Charlie Munger's theory is very accurate. Show me the incentives and I'll show you human behavior. We're obsessed with the quarterly improvements and the annual improvements and what basis points we were able to increase in that year because our bonuses are dependent on it. Mm-hmm. So I think those are some other dynamics. And then I think the other thing is the taxonomy of talent is pivoting or has pivoted from I to T, and we're moving into a future from T to N. What this means is when machines and automation and the Industrial Revolution happened, what happened was it went from farm labor to factory labor. It was very single-dimensional and fairly monolithic. But with digitization and computers, we pivoted from an I model into a T model. Now it's a matter of knowing a subject matter expertise in a single domain, but being cross-collaborative with other functions. But AI is forcing us to know more and do more because now data has been democratized at a scale that we've never had access to. So there will be a pivot into the M model where knowing one domain is no longer going to be enough. You're going to need to know a few and the intersection of how those few connect. And so the expectations are going to be a little bit more. Like, unfortunately, as if things weren't busy enough, complacency won't be an option moving into the future. And I love our generation, like Gen X, because we are probably the only generation that learned things the analog way, pivoted to becoming digitally fluent and native, and now we have the opportunity to become AI native and fluent, and that's a real advantage. But it also means that we have to step up because we're that ice cream sandwich and gooey middle in between. We're the only ones that can bridge and connect what's happening with us. So if we talk about the age of AI, and not to get woo-woo on anyone, but there has to be a bit of an awakening because we are all ships in a fleet and sometimes we feel lost, but collectively we have to do the right things. And has anyone ever played Galactica? Yes. All right, well, if you haven't played it, then you won't get the analogy.
But I mean,
yeah.
we're on the same age. So.
That's true, that's true. We're gonna feel like independent ships and anything I do isn't going to be enough. But if we get the one person's it's not enough, multiplied by 1,000, then 1,000,000, there will be a collective movement. And I do think there's gonna be a conscious awakening. And in parallel, I think we're gonna need a few whoopsies happening along the way before people wake up and go, wait a minute, I think we have to be a bit more prudent. I'm not saying slow down, but let's give some consideration to other angles.
I definitely want to go woo at some point in this conversation. One thing that I'll bring in a startup perspective, a stat that really shocked me this year.
Yeah.
So I was at, or last year, I was at TED AI.
Yeah.
And one of the guests I had on the podcast for episode 21 is Jeremiah Owing, who you probably know Jeremiah. Jeremiah was the closing keynote speaker at TED AI. And he runs the Blitzscaling Fund with Reid Hoffman and Chris Ye, which is focused on AI companies. And AI native companies, that means that they started in this era. Their revenue per employee on average in Silicon Valley is $2.7 million per employee. The best-in-class software as a service companies is around 650,000 prior to this boom.
Yeah.
And most SaaS companies are right around 350,000 or so. So it's really unprecedented revenue per employee. And it's actually led to what's been called the SaaS crash this year. A lot of SaaS companies this year
That's right.
Are around half of their market caps because of this fear of the disruptors coming along that don't have to worry about the workforce management change. They can just be like, I'm starting from the very beginning with tons of AI agents. A lot of these companies, will brag about the fact they have 10 employees, but then they have, hundreds and hundreds of additional employees through these AI agents. And the reason I mention that is that, when Culturati started and even today, it's not just big companies, it's also small companies that learn from each other. And it's almost like, we always learn from children, like where things are going.
Yeah.
Well, the startups are the way in business to learn what the children are doing, because the startups are the children in terms of where things can go. And I think, by the way, that can be a really good thing for big companies because it shows what's possible, and hopefully will lead to more big companies thinking about, wait, if they can achieve that per employee, then shouldn't we be going into a lot of new markets right now and going AI first, having a Google X type division to go after those new markets and really, really come out with new products, new services, new markets that they've always wanted to, but they've never had the capacity to do.
So I have the advantage of mostly an enterprise with a big tech, and I'm working for a Series F startup right now, and I've had a few of my own startups. And I don't think it's all bubblegums and unicorns in the startup world either. It's a game of hungry hippos out there right now. With legitimately, so as quickly as you start it up, you could potentially be like hostile takeover by someone else, or like they just have better tech. I think the other thing is a lot of the stuff that's being built in the startup world is fantastic, but it's not enterprise grade. And so that element of safety and trust, some of times it's lacking because they've prioritized speed over prudence. I get it, but there are some markets, some industries, to be able to get to the multi-billion-dollar market share, you have no choice but to be enterprise grade. And they don't have the discipline yet because they've been able to short circuit their way through all the capabilities that are available now. I think the third is with the current evaluations, there's a lot of monopoly money out there. So I believe those numbers, but I think it's a smaller pool of startups that could potentially meet that. And we call them the unicorns because they're rare. But we always hear about the amazing startups. We don't hear about the 999 that failed. So I'm wondering if the law of averages is kicking in with that evaluation, because there is a lot of monopoly money and like inflated evaluation. And I would say the last is when a startup stops becoming a startup and they become, let's say they pass scale-ups and now they're grown-ups. They're gonna go through the same issues as enterprises because now you're big with multiple individuals, multiple layers, multiple channels, multiple functions, multiple workflows. And if John Gall's theory around systemantics kicks in, the bigger something gets, the more chaos naturally wants to occur. It's law of entropy. And so it gets to a point where you can't linearly define every workflow because there's a lot of organic ways of doing business that can be defined in boxes and arrows and triangles. They're gonna face the same struggles. And so I think it's almost a curse to be super successful very quickly because they are, and my infamous quote that I always say is, sometimes when you're a startup and you grow too big and you haven't learned the discipline of what it takes to be enterprise grade, you're building the plane while you're flying it and you still have passengers on board.
Yeah.
And that could be more detrimental than anything. Not to say there aren't any successful startups. There's a ton, and I have met more 27-year-old multimillionaires that make me question every decision I've ever made in life. I'm like, what on earth? But a majority of them don't make it. And the ones that do, if they're able to get over that hump, they deserve it 100%.
Yeah, I think that that's sage advice. I mean, it's certainly, as an entrepreneur, I've faced that multiple times where you think the cost of something is X, but actually it's Y because you weren't providing.
And you can't explain it. You don't
Right.
understand it. You're like, why is this so complicated? The classic enterprise question. I don't understand. Why is it taking so long to get this done?
But I could see one of them watching this and say, wait, you guys don't get it. Like, we're running up an exponential curve.
Yeah.
And what used to cost a lot, a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, we're actually going to be able to sustain this. And I think time will ultimately tell. But I mean, we definitely, should just frame this conversation that, of course, there's been a lot of talk about AI here. It would be irresponsible for us not to be talking about AI here. We're talking about something that can dramatically increase productivity. Many of you have already seen it yourselves, can dramatically increase creativity. But we're at this moment in history where nothing has been prioritized like this before.
Agreed.
When Trump announced Project Stargate last year on January 21st, at $500 billion of funding in this race to create AGI versus the fear of like if the Chinese get it first, we're kind of back to that moment, like the Manhattan Project or the space race. That is more inflation adjusted than we spent on either the Manhattan Project or the space race. Inflation adjusted. Since that moment in time, there's been around $7 trillion worldwide allocated towards this race to create AGI, artificial general intelligence. We've never seen anything like this in human history. There's never been a moment in human history where humanity has prioritized anything with as much money, time, and energy. And we heard a lot on stage, you and I were texting each other about courageous leadership and about what is the definition of hero and what is the superpower of a hero. And the superpower of a hero is love. And we find this in all of the text. So, part of the reason we do need to go a bit woo is that we're at that time in humanity's history where this is the time of the great philosophers. Why are we here? What is our reality? Do we have a soul? Is there some bigger cosmic purpose to what is unfolding right now? You know, the synchronicities that are happening around this incredible moment. And I've got lots of opinions on that, but I would love to bring you in to that. And I've laid these out many, many times on the podcast. I don't want to dominate this conversation. I know you have a perspective on this too.
We were at dinner last night, and someone had mentioned there's I don't know if it's a causation or a correlation, that the deeper you are in AI, the more spiritual you've gotten in the path just to maintain your sanity. I think I'm like a walking talk. Thank you. Yes, you mentioned it. And I was like, yes, because I have been, quote unquote, what they call on the journey the past year and a half, because it can get dark sometimes. And I put a lot of pressure on myself of like, I need to course correct this path. And I've taken it on myself. And like sometimes, you know, I'm a mother of an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old, and I travel 3 to 4, sometimes 5 days a week. And I ask them, like, do you know why mommy's doing this? You know, are you guys mad at mommy? And they're like, no, you're making sure robots don't take over the world. And it's cute, and it's...
Cute and true.
Yes, yes, because we're messy, and we're beautiful. And I want my kids to have purpose in the future, and so much of what we do is connected to what we do. And I don't want a world like WALL-E. I don't want us to be big fat blobs drinking food out of a straw and doom scrolling all day. Like, that sounds horrible. And I think there's a lot of newborn geniuses that are out there that need the ability to exercise their minds. And I think we have to pave the way. And it sucks because I'm sacrificing days with my kids now, but I'm like, and you won't know this, but it's so that you have a future in the future. And I know it's busy. We can never keep up with our to-dos, no matter how efficient we become, no matter what frickin' agents we use. The expectations are just massive, and they're growing, and they're growing. But the one thing that I think we cannot, two things we cannot negotiate is our personal health. We have to exercise and treat ourselves better. And then 2, we have to have an element of consciousness. And I use the word consciousness very, very differently, because to me, the consciousness is about giving the early career adults the ability to form judgment, critical thinking, discernment, problem solving. Not everything can be prompted, because yes, AI is wonderful at uncovering very efficient paths, but it may not be the right path for us based on that relationship or that context or the nuances that go into play. And with all due respect, when you're on the job in your early stage, yeah, you're learning the job, but that's not what you're really learning. You're learning the practice of judgment. And more than ever, because we have so much information available at us, and so much, I'm gonna give you some stats. How many of you guys have flown internationally? How many movies, legitimately, can you really see in one sitting? 2, maybe 3 before you...
3.
The what?
As many as it takes.
Yeah, exactly. Before your bum starts getting a little sore, like maybe 3. Right now, we are ingesting about 84 gigabytes of data a day through, and 84 gigabytes through Teams, Slack, text, WhatsApp, personal email, job email, the gosh darn school PTA app that keeps pinging you like there's a school project. 84 gigabytes of data is equivalent to 17 full-length movies. We are not suffering from dementia or distraction. We are multitasking and trying to handle today the way we've handled the past. And we fundamentally weren't built to memorize, reflect, like retain this much information. So extracting signal from noise is going to be one of the most critical skill sets. And how do you do that? Because we can go into a situation without anyone saying a word, and our intuition will tell us something before the data even catches up. They're not getting that experience, and my heart breaks for them. And I tell my children, I'm like, you all are geniuses as long as there's Wi-Fi. You remove Wi-Fi, they're ding-dongs. So like we have to do silly little practices. I drive them to jiu-jitsu. I'm like, how do we get home? They're like, I don't know. I'm like, we've taken this trip like 1,000 times. I'll put my car in park. I'm like, I guess we're guessing. How do we get home? Or like we're at an airport. I'm like, how do we get out? They're like, well, how am I supposed to know? I'm like, look at the signs. There's plenty. Do you know what the word exit means? Like, they're just not spatially aware. Like, things aren't connecting yet. And so I'm not teaching them algebra and geometry. I'm teaching them common sense and critical thinking. And we need to do that for the young adults and our children. And every now and then, whether it's calling it in your career and saying, okay, this isn't my environment, I'm not going to flourish here, but being in another environment that says, run like a stallion because we believe in what you're doing. Every decision we make is so, so important, not just for us, but the future generations as well. And I think there is going to be a collective conscious. And there's going to be, whatever that revolt takes shape, it's going to happen at all layers. It just has to.
I think that, I think things are happening for a reason. And I think that the divine is working through us right now to get us to have a collective awakening so that we can manifest a future of abundance for everyone on the planet. And just to personify this, the book I'm writing, I cover this Uber driver that picks me up at 4:30 in the morning for a flight. And he and I just have this electric connection. I can't quite describe it. We're just meant to be together. And
it's also 4:30 in the morning.
It is 4:30 in the morning, which you would not think that you would be in that type of mood on either side, right? And he's from this country called Chad. And I was embarrassed to not know anything about the country of Chad. It's a country in Africa. I'm using ChatGPT really quickly to get up to speed as we're talking. It's got a GDP of $660 a person. Our GDP here in America is $86,000 a person. The things that we have here, he's just raving about America, like that he's like, I'm saving up for the next 6 to 7 years so I can bring my family here. I'm supporting 6 people back home. And, he's like, this is the land of abundance, Yeah. And I personified in my book that it hit me on that drive where I'm like, who's going to take care of Chad? Like, who's going to go in there? There's not really a lot of money to be made in Chad. Like in a global capitalist society, who's going to go in? And the answer came to me. It's robots, it's AI, it's quantum computing, it's things getting to a point where they're so cheap and so abundant that some promising NGO or some country, some Kenyan entrepreneur or somebody close enough by says, I'm going to go in there, and the costs now have gotten to a point where I'm going to build the clean water supply. I'm going to build the power they need. I'm going to build the healthcare they need, et cetera. And that's, I think, part of what is manifesting through us. And, when I was at TED 2 years ago, Demis Sisyphus was on stage, and Chris Anderson was pushing him on, like, why are you doing this? What is your purpose? Like, why do you care about doing this? And he said, I really want to understand the so-called tree of knowledge. Like, I want to understand the resolution of our universe at the Planck scale level. And there was a really interesting, exchange back and forth with him and Elon Musk, which Elon Musk has plenty of issues. I'm not going to defend those. But it was a really interesting exchange where they're both saying this is their big drive. And I think that there's a huge yearning for us in humanity to understand, the reality we're in, which I think we're going to be able to decode more and more as we ride up this exponential curve, but also this deep yearning to actually create this future of abundance. And I know that that's very hard to see because, you and I talked about it on the podcast that what if the world's like, 5, mega trillionaires and everything else, but there's no market if that happens. It's like,
a lot of
people are
collapse
up with pitchforks and, it's just not going to happen in the global village. And I think the global village is going to demand abundance as we manifest abundance.
So if you ask me, and I love your perspective because you're so just optimistic and full of heart. And I love that. And I love that for you. I might be able to subscribe to that philosophy If there were a few women in the Mag 7,
Right. Yeah.
but there aren't, and
I'll give you two rising, Dr. Fifi Lee and Mira Murati, both
true,
rising big time.
but like even if you look at them, Mira's got a multi-billion-dollar company, and no one knows what that company does yet. And our beloved Fifi is still in academic world in Stanford, and she's doing a lot of amazing things, but they are not
she
in
left. She started World Labs now.
She did,
Yep.
but they're not in the flywheel of the Mag 7 that's investing multi-billion dollars, so they're now too big to fail.
Right.
Like if we can just inject maybe a spiritual leader and a few women, I'm good.
Yep.
But we're not doing that. And the fact of the matter is we have been much more efficient with water, energy, like 100 times fold in the past 20
Yep,
years, because
that's
we've
true.
seen
Yep.
Moore's Law come to effect, and we still have countries without running water.
Yep.
Like they're still dying of disease. So we've experienced abundance. Why aren't we carrying it through? Just greed and power, like unfortunately, we're messy. And some of that stuff can override. And so, I don't know, maybe I should think like you. And I'm trying to, hence the spiritual path that I'm on of like how many freaking crystals do I need to hold just to make sure we course correct this darn thing? And I'm gonna do everything in my power to get there. But I think this is why conferences like this matter. It's a reminder that you're not alone. It's a reminder that we're all overwhelmed. But it's also a reminder of it is good that you're not a technologist. As a matter of fact, you're gonna have more influence because there's more in the world that aren't technologists than technologists. And you do need to lead with heart. And Chris, thank you for being the humanitarian techie that you
Yes,
are, right? Like,
absolutely.
if we just had more techno-functional individuals, I think we would be a lot more balanced in our approach. And so whether we just need a massive shock and an awakening so there is a collective conscious, great, I'm all for it. Whether we have a spiritual leader and some women in the Mag 7 and there's more balance, great, I'm all for it. Or if it leads down to a revolt at multiple levels, great, I'm all for it. But it's probably gonna take a version of all three to come together for us to make sure that the path we're on gives us the ability to thrive in any sense of the word.
Yeah. I agree with that, and I think that the meta theme for humanity is that love has to conquer fear for us to make it.
But you know what? I don't think they were hugged enough as a kid. I don't think there's enough love in their hearts, if I'm being honest.
I think that could be the case. But I really think that, you know, as humanity experiences more and more of these superpowers, that what's going to happen is humanity at large is going to want to grasp that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a bit like
That I agree.
envisioning what it would have been like to be in India prior to the rise of Gandhi. Like, people wouldn't have been able to see it, and they would have just thought, gosh, you know, this country used to be so amazing. You know, there were so many areas of India right prior to the British kind of collapsing it all together. And, you know, they reclaimed that, and they reclaimed that through a nonviolent leader. And I think that we're going to have tremendous bottoms-up pressure from people as they see abundance. I just don't think it's going to be sustainable for a world of oligarchs. I just don't see humanity
I hope
taking
it's
that.
not sustainable, because having a few trillionaires with bunkers in New Zealand just isn't going to be the answer for us.
It's not going to be
But-
the answer for them, too. I mean, now they're trillionaires, but they're living in a dystopia.
True, totally true. What I don't think we can do right now is abdicate our responsibilities and kind of say, okay, I'm just going to write out the next 10 years until I retire. I don't think we could debutate the choices of like, I have to make active choices right now to secure a future, even though we're all so tired and like it's an endless list of to-dos. And it was funny because the aha moment didn't kick in until I was at Davos in January, and I was speaking on a panel around security and AI and quantum and all that other jazz. But I also had a chance to just listen and pop in and go and learn and take notes. And like the one key takeaway was no one knows what to do. And the second key takeaway is everyone's paralyzed and making a choice because they don't know what to do. But I think we cannot not make a choice. We can't abdicate, we can't debutate, we have to make a choice of what we instinctively and intuitively know is the right path. And even though we're gonna get pressures, because the reality is we worked in enterprise, right? Board of directors, executive leadership team, CEOs gonna be like, wait, so why haven't we reduced efficiency by 22%? Why haven't top line grown by 9%? I don't understand. Why is it so complicated? And we're gonna have to give them a really brilliant story of, we need to keep hiring. Why are we hiring? Because. And tell them the story if it's actually going to cost us more money in the future. Our governance system is based on expertise, and we are going to be out of experts in about 8 to 12 years. By the way, we have workforce folks who don't have judgment, critical thinking, because we're not giving them the pathway to gain that experience. We have to be better storytellers, and we have to make choices, even though we don't know what we're doing yet, because no one does. And it was mentioned last night at dinner. The playbook is not written, folks. There is no modernized tech stack or best practices. And quite frankly, any framework and model we're seeing, that shit's being made up on the fly. Let's call a spade, because we don't know. Our best guesstimates maybe will carry us 6 to 9 months. But I was in a strategic planning session 3 and 5 years, and I almost checked out. And the CEO called me, he's like, Sol, is this not entertaining for you? And I was like, I'm so sorry, but how do we know what's gonna happen in 9 months? So this is, for me, I can build a beautiful deck and it's gonna be gorgeous vaporware for you. But the reality is I'm gonna need to react to and respond with prudence for you. That's my value to you, not making assumptions that may or may not come true. Well, let's go through the process, because I know it's needed and we need to present to the board and the investors.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly well said. And I would say that a lot of the answers, I think, for what we actually need to do are buried in the spiritual text that we've kind of dogmatically separated with the rise of the rational mind.
It's probably the most simplistic instruction manual right now that we can follow.
Yes, because what humanity needs to do at large is the heart has to conquer the head. We've had such a rise of ego. We've had such a rise of science. I mean, we're all here as a product of science as well. I mean, all the conveniences that we have, are because of the rise of science, so many of them. But there's also so much that we've used science for: algorithmic manipulation and social media, algorithmic manipulation and trying to constantly keep us in a fear state with the business model of the media. I'm a huge fan of the free press. I'm talking about the constant dystopia pushed to us. We would just think we're living in a dystopia. And, the pharmaceutical complex feeding off the opioid addicts and making them addicted. I mean, that's why Brian Hubbard and Governor Perry are doing what they're doing with the Americans for Ibogaine initiative. Literally, it started with Brian Hubbard being in Kentucky and seeing these people die from opioid addiction, and how much it was just making those people absolutely miserable, and the whole complex was feeding off them. And he's like, we need a pattern interrupt here. This is wrong. And he's like, this is what's happening across, the poor parts of America.
Hey, Brett.
Can
we move into Q&A?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, absolutely. We can definitely move into Q&A.
So I want to ask, and you and I have talked about this. I mean, where do you get your optimism that these, the leaders of the Magnificent Seven are ever gonna turn philanthropic or magnanimous? Their wives certainly have when they've left them, but they have not. And they have shown no willingness to share. And where's Paul? Paul, Zach, and I were talking one day when we were talking about, men that are shooting up, overdosing on testosterone, lose their capacity for empathy and compassion. I think that's one of the problems we have going on, not only with Magnificent Seven, but a lot of people around the White House. But where does this optimism that they're going to become good guys come from?
Well, I'll say where it comes from me. I don't know if you would agree with this or not, but for me, it's people like Dario Modi writing a beautiful paper like he wrote recently on the adolescence of technology. That's a super responsible, amazing thing to do. It's people like Dimas Sisibis, you know, going on 60 Minutes and like really thoughtfully laying out like his plea and prayer, or going to TED and his plea and prayer for how we make it through. It's people like Eric Schmidt working with Henry Kissinger. You know, you mentioned that, Chris, on stage. Genesis, the last chapter of Genesis is Henry Kissinger's dying prayer for humanity. He passed away very, very shortly after completing that writing. And, you know, Craig Mundy working, he's also a co-author of that book, Genesis, working with Thomas Friedman to come out with that New York Times article to say, here's the one thing that the US and China must agree on. And I agree, I cover that in my book, that the US and China have to collaborate on AGI. We cannot play the kind of nuclear weapons game with this. And so I actually see, and I see people like, you know, Fifi Lee, I mean, you know, Dario came from OpenAI and said there's a better way. Mir Murati came from OpenAI and said there's a better way. So I think that they're going to be forced to grow up pretty fast because they can feel deep down the visceral fear themselves
Elon
of like,
and Zuckerberg and Visa, they're going to.
I mean, I think that there's going to be multiple models. I'm not saying they're all going to like wake up and become conscious capitalists, but there are models that are becoming that, and there are dollars following them. I mean, you know, Claude by Anthropic is far younger than ChatGPT, and it's catching up very quickly revenue-wise.
Yeah.
Very, very quickly.
I mean, talk about decisions. I built a lot of projects and things within OpenAI. It took me 2 weekends. I officially transferred everything over into Claude, and I shut my subscription down with OpenAI. I'm one, but if we get enough of if we get enough, right? Like, yeah, exactly. And that's how Claude rose up. Like, people are understanding, but
it's to your point on they have agency. Everybody has choice. Like,
and it comes
10
down to
million
that.
people made that
Yeah.
choice.
And I think like connecting the dots between what do we do next? Even in this room, like last night during dinner, it was a very intellectual conversation. But it wasn't until I got to know about people's kids and them graduating and accidentally buying 5 dresses and like, you know, things like that where I felt people's hearts coming out because they were touching to something they loved. And if you think about the body, right, they say we're made of 4 components. The physical set, our bodily functions. The mindset, which is very over-indexed. The soul set, and then the heart set. We have over-indexed on purely operating from our mindset. If we can just pause and drop into, and most of us actually don't even know how to do this, into our heart set, it's amazing the element of intuition and instinct that kicks in that the data hasn't even caught up to yet. That's where the choices need to be made. And again, I have to put it out there. I'm not the soft woo-woo. You're not going to see me with flowers in the hair. I am as results-oriented, action-oriented. Like, I'm all about business growth. But I firmly believe if there is a way to make profit and do it consciously as well. And if more people can drop into the heart set and make those decisions, you'd be amazed at how much more precise we are, but how much better the long-term impacts
And
are
there's a
going to be.
major rise in technology to do just that. Like on episode 9 of the podcast, I had John and Lauren from Evolve Technologies. And one thing that's underestimated is how this exponential curve is going to allow us to create technologies like theirs. He left Meta, and a lot of the team members left Meta to create a system, a hardware device where you could drop into that deep state to open up the heart. And
because we
lead
don't
from
know
the
how.
heart.
We've been out of it for so long.
Yeah.
And that takes practice.
Okay, sure.
Any
One
questions?
question.
I think we're all just burnt out, to be honest with you. We're tired.
I've got the mic.
Ooh.
Hey, guys.
Nancy. Oh my gosh.
Oh, I hurt you.
Good to see you, Nancy.
Yeah, such a great talk. Thank you guys so much. And you kind of touched on this a bit, but I want to give you a moment to kind of share a little bit more about this. So there's some really great things going on in AI that can like solve massive problems for the world. And then there's the fear around what's going to happen to the workforce and our future generations. And when AI and robots take over, what happens to humanity? And it's really hard to separate those two things. But we have a lot of leaders in the room. And so what could we do? Like, can you give us a checklist of like things that we can do to try and move us towards more the positive sides of AI versus what could end up happening? And I learned a lot about this. I saw the AI doc on Saturday night. It goes into all of this as well.
You did see it. Yeah, it's crazy, right? This is like the line I love most from that documentary is this is the last great mistake we get to make. I hope we have the maturity to manage the very darn thing that we just built.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I cover this in the last chapter of my book, and the last chapter is on the inner journey. Yeah. And I lay out like how to actually drop into your heart and lead from the heart. And I think that there is a huge rise underway in consciousness and really, grappling with what is the nature of consciousness. I mean, last year, Dan Brown came out with The Secret of Secrets, amazing book on this topic if you've read it. The Telepathy Tapes was at one point the most popular podcast. Season 2 is fantastic. Michael Pollan's new book just came out. It's called A World Appears. Great book on the nature of consciousness. Annika Harris, who's married to Sam Harris, came out with Lights On last year. So there's more and more of these books, and all of them lead you down the same path of spirituality, which is whatever it is, it's loving. And we know that the alignment of the universe that we're in, the reality that we're actually in, and it's in all the spiritual text, is that we're in a place, we come from a place of light and love. And we're here in this world of form, and we need to recognize that that's the actual reality, and that the more we continue to lead from the ego and we lead from the mind, we will destroy the world. And we will not live a life of happiness. Happiness is only found from the inside, is the only place. There's no amount of external material accumulation that will lead to lasting happiness. And so that's the path, I think, the arc that humanity is waking up to, because the younger generation, their social media use is starting to decline. Their alcohol use is falling off a cliff. They're like Neo in the Matrix. They're like, look, we're not gonna put up with this bullshit world you all have created where it's profits over people. Enough is enough. And I think AI is the ultimate forcing function to get humanity to wake up.
And what you refer to is the bend in the river in your book.
Yeah.
So I got the PDF version. I got to read a little bit.
Yeah.
But you would ask for a
and
checklist.
Thank you for
I asked
the
for a call to
testimonial on
action.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So the checklist. I've done over 200 deployments in the course of my 16-year AI career. The number one rule that I always follow is always ask, or I shouldn't say it, make sure you're outsourcing tasks and you're not outsourcing critical thinking to artificial intelligence. It's a non-negotiable. Our brains are muscles. If we don't use it, it atrophies. So there is a potential for intellectual atrophy if we're using it to do all the brainstorming, if we're using it to write our emails because we need to fine-tune tonality. Well, part of understanding and strengthening your soft skills is understanding your very own tone and how you're coming across. It takes some muscles, but you have to study what's been rewritten so that you can get better at the tonality. So outsource tasks, not critical thinking. Don't develop a codependency on artificial intelligence the way we have with GPS. My running joke is we turn GPS even though we know where we're going. The darn thing says turn left, we turn left, turn right, we turn right. And for anyone who's ever seen The Office, like they ended up in the middle of a lake. And we laugh about hallucinations, and Chris mentioned hallucinations are a feature. They're not a bug because these frontier models were not trained to say, I don't know. So like a lot of our peers, they're gonna make stuff up, right? But we can call out our peers, but we're not able to call out LLMs. So outsource tasks, not critical thinking. Be very careful if you see yourself developing like a codependency on it. Do not experience intellectual atrophy. We have to introduce other metrics in the measurement of success that are outside of productivity and efficiency so that we can get into the world from AI as being a cost-cutting tactic to an augmentation strategy of the existing workforce so that we can exponentially do more with what we have. And so introducing metrics like cultural ROI, relevancy ROI, effectiveness. How much more effective are we? How much more trust have we built? There's other ways of defining success. We have no choice but to double down on the very things that make us human. Critical thinking, abstract thinking, the ability to think independently, autonomously, relying on senses before we have the data to catch up, problem solving. With all due respect, every invention and novel idea came from humans. So AI can simulate a lot and it can regurgitate what it has, but the inventions come from us. If we atrophy, we will not be able to come up with the resolutions. And we have no choice. And we must invest in the early career individuals, because believe it or not, they're part of the answer to how we redesign workflows of the future. It's just there, because sometimes we can't get out of our own way, because we've been doing our jobs for a really long time.
I love
And
that.
so pivoting from tolerating to accepting, I heard you. We just got to go there.
Yeah, that is a beautiful way to close. Ladies and gentlemen, Sol Rashidi.
And
She's
Brett,
amazing.
yay! Thank you.